This bike might look familiar. Of course, it's the Giant that stars on the cover of the 2024 edition of the Evolution Annual, all e-bike magazine that's just hit the stands. This is a pretty sweet Giant. Blake's been riding it now for a couple of months, really digging his teeth into it. And today we're going to kind of go for a bit of a deep dive into some of the things that sort of make this bike really unique and some of the things that we think you're going to probably love the most if this is a bike that's on your shopping list. Now Blake, one of the things that really strikes me about this bike, now this is a bike I've ridden myself as well, quite a bit over at the launch in Utah. Mate, it comes down to this frame that Giant have done a really nice job of putting together.
Yeah, so I used to work in a Giant dealership, and in doing that you get to learn a little bit of the ins and the outs of Giant. Now it's no surprise that Giant, being one of the mega brands within the industry, they actually own their own carbon frame manufacturing facility. So that means that they're not actually sort of restrained by, you know, the weave of the carbon or the layup, any of the molds. They make everything from scratch themselves, and they're willing to, you know, try different things within the development process. So that is the end result. Basically, they've built it from the ground up. They had the idea of housing a full power motor within a Super SL package, and they've done a fantastic job.
So it's a really pretty unique way, I guess, of making an e-bike, because it really starts with like full tailoring the frame around the motor and everything else.
Exactly right.
Love that. Now, talking of which, one of the things that's a real standout about this bike is that it is the lightest full-powered e-bike on the planet. Giant actually offer this, the Trance, in 4 different spec levels, but they all feature the same motor and the same battery. Now, it's a 400 watt-hour battery that's neatly tucked away, hidden inside there. There's also a range extender. And yeah, the lightest version of this bike gets pretty close to 18 kilos, I think about 18 and a half. This here is the number 2 spec, so it's got, you know, heavier wheels, heavier suspension. It kind of doesn't have that sort of full extreme lightweight kind of guise, which does affect the handling a little bit. But yeah, let's talk a bit about that motor, because one thing you notice about it is much smaller than any Yamaha motor we've seen before, right? Exactly right.
So the overall sort of packaging of the internals of the motor has changed somewhat to sort of slim it, sort of the width of the motor, to sort of suit the lines better of the new Trance frame. But it still retains its 85 Newton meters of absolute. It's got so much punch, this motor.
How does it feel when you're pedaling around? Obviously you've got all the different settings, but when you have it in that top, because obviously the overall reduced weight of the bike, but you still got all that power.
Exactly right. So compared to some of the like the full size battery Giant e-bikes, like you're shedding 3, 4, even 5 kilos depending on what model you were looking at. So, you know, you're essentially saving 20 to 25% of the weight of the overall bike, yet remaining or retaining the same amount of power. Like it's like comparing, you know, a big American muscle car to you know, an Italian sports car, like
it. And because you've got all that power, less weight, you actually the life or the range of the battery really gets extended past that, what you'd assume for a 400 watt hour.
Exactly right.
So you're gonna get longer rides. Now, one of the things that I really loved about this bike, and I was telling Blake all about when I got back from launch, is Giant make this exclusively as a mullet setup. We know those guys, you know, do love the 2.9ers, front and rear, but this thing, mullet, and I found it made the bike really playful. The other really strong kind of credential of having a mullet setup, especially that 27.5 rear wheel, it really works nicely with the Maestro design that's unique to Giant.
Exactly.
They stick with across their full range of full suspension mountain bikes. So tell us a bit about how you got on with that sort of the mullet setup and how you felt the bike reacted and rode because of that.
Yeah, so I felt the exact same way. So I've always quite liked the Maestro suspension system, but again, I touch on every sort of review, I'm a shorter guy, so I don't necessarily get along so well with my type of preferred riding with the 29-inch rear wheel. And especially the Maestro system is a longer sort of platform within its own linkages. So you add a 29-inch wheel on that and the back wheels just keeps going, it goes too far away for me. So the fact that they've been able to sort of reduce that overall length, yet retain the key features of the Maestro suspension system is just, you know, it ticks all the boxes for sure.
Perfect. One of the things I really like about the bike is actually the aesthetics as well. It's really slick, kind of quite slender. Obviously it's got the little down tube, much slicker than any kind of e-bike that we've seen from Giant in the past. But then also like really neat things like the cable management system there, the way everything's kind of been integrated in, obviously the mode adjustment built into the grip there as well. I think Giant have done a really neat job with all of those bits of the puzzle. Tell us a bit about the motor and the connectivity. Obviously, you've got the app, and you can customize the power settings a lot more than a lot of the other motor manufacturers that we're finding. Did you sort of play around with some of that stuff?
Absolutely. So it's Giant's go-to app, and they've done a really, really good job with, like, the connection is foolproof. I'm definitely not a technologically advanced sort of guy.
Me either, mate. Me either.
And can struggle. I have struggled in the past with a few other brands, sort of connectivity and that kind of thing. But Giant just make it so simple. It works first time, every time. And yeah, you can have a couple of different sort of preset modes or sort of like profiles, I guess you could say, depending on if you're riding sort of more pedally trails and you don't need as much sort of top end power, you can sort of dumb that down a little bit, which will make things easier to keep control of your battery capacity. Because that's one thing, you can get a little bit carried away. I know I've done it on a couple of rides where you get excited, you've got all this power and you ride it as if you've got a massive 900 watt hour battery, and then
your eye gets cut short.
Yeah, exactly
that's
right.
Me too.
So you just need to sort of be a little bit wary of that. But on the connectivity side of things, it's Giant do a really, really good job of it.
Wicked. Now, as we mentioned before, you spent a lot of time now, a couple of months riding this bike. We've said it before, it's full power yet mid-weight, mullet. What kind of rider do you reckon is going to sort of really be attracted to this bike and love it, kind of really fit in with that style? Right? What sort of rider do you reckon that this bike's catered for? I
think given it's like a 150 fork, 140 mil rear travel bike, like definitely it fits very nicely into that sort of trail bike center focused rider. So I've always said it, like you buy your bike depending on what your not necessarily local trails, but your key places that you ride. You pick 2 or 3, maybe 4 places that you spend most of your time riding, and that's the type of bike that you should sort of look for.
Smart.
So yeah, like you want to do sort of some longer rides, maybe a bit more, as much climbing as you're doing descending, that kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, like it loves the rough trails, but you can find the limit of the bike quite quickly on some pure downhill trails and that kind of thing.
It's not really what it's been designed for, though,
not at all. Yeah,
it's obviously it's not like a rain or something. It's that it is still that Trance, that sort of do it all trail bike.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, there you have it. That is, of course, the 2024 Trance X Advanced E Plus Elite. This bike is available right now at Giant dealers across Australia. There's 4 different spec models, like we mentioned. They start at about $8.5 grand, and they work all the way up from there. But yeah, loving this bike. Blake's got along really, really well with it. For plenty more content, be sure to stay tuned to our channel for more.